Well, it's the end of another year, and here in 2024, I turned the big 5-0. Turned 50 years old. And I've been skateboarding now for 38 years. But I've also been doing a lot of other stuff. And, I'm not a big age guy. I'm still active and healthy and fit at 50, but I did get a bunch of reoccurring issues over the last 5 years, some knee problems, tendonitis in my elbows. So a few things that have reminded me that I am a little older as an athlete. Now, I do consider myself a skateboarder. As I said, I've been skateboarding for almost 40 years now. But if you were to ask me overall, I would call myself an athlete because I've done a lot of other sports than just skateboarding. And it certainly comes from humble beginnings. I can remember in about grade 6, I was asking my mom to write me a note to get out of gym class because I was always the last picked for any team. I wasn't very good at anything, but back then the one thing I was okay at was running. I was on the cross-country team for my elementary school. We're going way back here. And I really enjoyed running. When I was a kid, I did a lot of swimming. I took swimming lessons. My parents had a large in-ground pool in our yard, so I was able to learn to swim at a very early age, and I really enjoyed swimming. But once I completed swimming lessons, I was a little too young for the next step, which was lifeguarding, so I stepped away from swimming and didn't end up going back until years and years later. But I've tried my hand at many, many different sports over the years. When I was a kid, I played soccer and hockey, but I didn't really like team sports. I also didn't like having to be somewhere at a specific time. I didn't like the whole schedule. I also didn't like, if you made a mistake on the team, you're responsible for the whole team's failure. I always wanted to participate in activities in sports where the success or failure relied solely on my abilities, my determination. At age 50, I find myself sort of reflecting on my life, especially when it comes to something like athletics, because I am slowly struggling a little bit more to do all of the things I used to do. The body doesn't recover as fast. And I'm here in my gym today. This has certainly been the bread and butter of being an athlete for me over the last 5 years. Now, I've worked out for more than 30 years now, on and off. I've had multiple home gyms, but this is my current home gym. And the catalyst for this really was a couple of things. The pandemic hit and all the gyms closed down, so I started to buy a little bit of gym equipment. But then also finding out that many of the problems I was facing, the knee tendonitis and a lot of the other issues I was having, was really a strength-based issue. I just didn't have enough strength as an athlete in my late 40s. And I am probably close to being the strongest I've ever been in my life now at 50 years old. So I would say weight training has become a big part of my regime to stay fit as an athlete, but also weight training itself, I think, is very athletic. And even if all you did was go to the gym, but you were very serious about it, I would still say you're an athlete. Skateboarding has certainly been the main focus of my life in athletics, but there have been so many other things that I have really enjoyed doing, and I have actually competed in different kinds of sports. So not just participated, but I've competed in things like running and triathlon. I've done some dirt jumping competitions on a bike. So I've done a little bit of everything over the years. So let's reflect together on 50 years of sports.
Skateboarding. This was definitely the driving force that shaped the person I am today. This was the first sport where I didn't have to have a coach, and there was no set time where I had to go do it. And I could be creative. I could really express myself. Skateboarding taught me determination, how to overcome obstacles. It taught me perseverance. Also taught me a lot about handling injuries and pain management. It really toughened me up quite a bit. I was also lucky enough to become a professional skateboarder. I was a blue-collar skateboarder though, and what do I mean by that? Well, I was paid to travel around and perform in a show, so I did have sponsors over the years, but I never had a board with my name on it or anything like that. But it did support me, and I was able to live off skateboarding. Skateboarding is still a passion of mine and something I enjoy to this very day. Snowboarding has been in and out of my life throughout the years. And you'd think as a skateboarder, I would have loved this sport too. But they're quite different sports, and to be honest, I absolutely hate the cold. Well, I'm sure I'll catch some flack for this one, but when aggressive inline first came out, it was actually really cool. And as a skateboarder, jumping around on a set of wheels just seemed like the natural thing to do, so of course I wanted to try it. Also, the shows I was talking about earlier that I toured around performing in always had a BMXer and an inline skater, so I always felt very comfortable just throwing on a pair of skates and booting around for a bit. Nowadays, my wife Chris and I skate all the time, but it's for fitness now, and it's also a great way to check out a new city when we're traveling. If I had to start all over again with a new sport, it would be BMX. I've had them throughout my life, and my first real injury, a concussion, came from trying to jump a shady little ramp I made in my driveway, which consisted of a board with a brick under it. Here I am just a few years ago with a new BMX. Almost everyone I knew back in the 90s got into mountain biking at some point. For me, it wasn't really until the frames changed to these slope-style, shorter frames that looked a little bit more like a BMX and actually felt a lot like a BMX. This is where my BMX background really came in to help me out. And I was actually even able to get sponsored by Kona Bikes. I was on their flow team, so I got some apparel and a few different products, parts, things like that. I absolutely loved mountain biking, but there's only so much time in the day, and over the years, different sports started to take precedent over mountain biking. When I got my Ridley cross bike, I found that I could ride the trails just as easy on that bike as I could on my mountain bike, so it just made sense to condense down to one bike that could do kind of everything. I do have to admit, I miss dirt jumping a little bit though. I think this is another one of those sports that's sort of looked down on over the years, but this is way back in the early 2000s when parkour was really just invented. And again, as somebody that loved jumping around on a skateboard, I couldn't resist the thought of taking it out to an urban environment and just trying to jump around from object to object, so I did get into parkour for a little while. That also led me into gymnastics and trampoline. I mean, who doesn't want to do a backflip, right? This was my trampoline in my backyard for many years. Okay, so let's leave behind what I'll categorize as skill-based sports for endurance sports. I mentioned that I started running way back in elementary school on the cross-country team, and throughout my life, I've trained here and there to run a 5K. It wasn't until 2012 when the Olympics inspired me to try triathlon that running really became something that I was obsessed with. Although I love swimming and cycling, running was just something I was a lot better at, or at least faster at. I've run all the way up to 50K, and trail running was an absolute obsession of mine for years. But sadly, a plantar tear took me out of running for about a year and a half. During that time, I just got into different sports, mostly cycling and stand-up paddleboarding, and by the time it healed, my focus was just in different areas. I still run today, but mostly short distance, 5s and 10s. I'm a competitive guy, so of course I would get into racing as soon as I started running. I've done everything from 3s, 5s, 10Ks, half marathons. I even won my age group for the Subaru series back in 2013, which means I amassed enough points that year to take the overall for my age group. I'm prone to overuse injuries, so a sport like triathlon that allows me to switch and train 3 different sports at once helps prevent my body from getting overuse injuries. I've absolutely loved triathlon, and I'm looking to race again in the next year or so. I even raced an off-road triathlon. So as I mentioned, I did have a pool growing up, and I learned to swim at a very early age, but I probably had a good 20 to 25 year hiatus before getting back in the pool to try swimming again for triathlon. It's become one of my favorite activities, and it's just really gentle on the body. Cycling in general is just one of my absolute favorite activities, and it's something my wife and I enjoy doing together. We may have gone a little overboard with the bikes in the past. I don't think there's an aspect or type of cycling I don't like, but I especially love my cross bike now that I have a bike that can go from the road to the trail and basically does everything I want it to do. You know, I can't even picture a future without cycling in it. I have a lot of mixed feelings about climbing. I tried it years ago at a gym and thought it was okay, but it wasn't until I met my wife and she took me outdoor climbing that I really saw what climbing was about. I think it was maybe our second or third date where she took me rappelling. I've really enjoyed climbing, but I'm absolutely terrified of heights, which made it very difficult to really enjoy it. I was fortunate enough to try my hand at ice climbing. That's a whole different aspect and a very difficult one. I'm glad for the experiences I had climbing, but in the end, it just wasn't my sport, and I really wasn't able to get over that fear of heights. Well, let's have some fun watching me get broke off here. As I mentioned when I talked about skateboarding, one of the things that it really did was teach me how to handle pain and manage injuries, and I learned a lot about recovery. I've had quite a few over the years, and my body's still paying the price today. I've always had a relationship with strength training. I watched my dad work out when I was a kid, and when I was 19, I had a friend who was a bodybuilder that took me under his wing and taught me everything I needed to know to get me going in fitness and weight training. Nowadays, it's become a huge part of my life as an older athlete, just trying to maintain strength and fitness. And if I'm being honest, it's become one of my favorite activities to do. I consider myself lucky that I like weight training. Most people don't. I can't wait to get into the gym every day. Sports and fitness have changed throughout the years, but one of the biggest changes I've seen is that there are a lot more older athletes still participating. And I don't see any reason why I have to quit doing sports. I mean, as the years go by, the injuries start to pile up, and you have to change the way you do things. Nowadays, I spend a lot more time just on body maintenance and injury prevention, strength training, and flexibility. But I still enjoy doing all of these sports, and I want to keep doing them for as many years to come as I can. It doesn't get easier as I get older, but I do get wiser. Sports and fitness have been an outlet for energy and stress throughout the years. Sometimes it can just bring clarity to my mind and help me think through a problem. Sometimes it's just a way to push through a negative emotion. Sometimes it just feels good. All I know is I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep playing sports for the rest of my life until I can't take another single step. If you need me, I'll be out at the park, or the pool, or the gym, or pedaling along a long country road.